Okay, hi everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone for joining us today, and welcome to the Los Angeles Conservancy's Preservation Perspective series. I'm Adrian Scott Fine. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy for the Los Angeles Conservancy, and I will be moderating today's program. This is our fourth and our last in the series, as it is right now, and features the Council District 13 runoff with incumbent Mitch O'Farrell and candidate Hugo Soto-Martinez. Sorry about that. We bring this program to you to inform and highlight preservation aspects and hear what candidates have to say on their viewpoints on preservation. So you are aware the Conservancy, as a nonprofit organization, cannot and will not endorse any of the candidates as part of this series. Briefly about the Conservancy, for those that may not already be familiar, our work at the Los Angeles Conservancy is fundamentally about people and places, and the idea that places help tell our stories in hundreds of diverse communities all over Los Angeles. And we do this work through both education and advocacy, and approach it through the lens of managing change as Los Angeles is continually growing and developing. And for our members joining us today, thank you for all that you do. And for everyone else, thank you too. And please consider joining us as a partner and support us in this meaningful work that we all do. Today, we are focused on Council District 13 and its many historic places and communities contained within, from Hollywood to historic Filipino Town to Echo Park to Sunset Square. CD 13 is rich in historic places and neighborhoods, and like all of Los Angeles, face unique challenges through the planning and development processes. We have over 400 Conservancy members active throughout Council District 13, and many more doing great work through various community organizations, some who are joining us today. So let's go ahead and get started. And first of all, let me turn off my screen here and officially welcome Hugo and Mitch to the program. Please turn your cameras on. So welcome to you both here. And I'll explain a little bit about the program. We normally do beforehand, we do a little coin toss to determine who goes first. So let's just do that in person here. So whoever wants to call it first, either heads or tails, will determine who goes first. So
tails.
It's heads. So Mitch, you're first. And we will alternate as the program goes. Let me explain a little bit about what we have in store for everyone. So today's program is not a debate, it's a forum. It will be with a series of questions developed by us and in part by you, the audience, as many of you have submitted great suggestions, and we certainly have looked at those and taken from those. Through both long form and what we're calling rapid fire questions, each candidate will be given brief but equal time to respond. To the candidates, we strongly encourage you to watch the timer on the screen, as otherwise we will have to cut you off, and neither of us will like that. So I think you'll see that the time will go by quickly for each of these questions. Overall, the program should be about 45 minutes long. There will be opening, closing remarks by both candidates. There are no rebuttals, so we ask each candidate to stay focused on the question and your views on preservation, and always be respectful to one another and mute yourself while the other candidate is speaking. And to each candidate, thank you again for taking part today. We look forward to learning more about why preservation matters to you, the important work that you're doing, and how you intend to do this within Council District 13. So we just did the coin toss. So Mitch will go first, followed by Hugo. And again, for your opening comments, you'll have 90 seconds on the clock. And feel free to begin at any time here. And again, keep your eye on the timer. So let's start with Mitch. Thank you.
Adrian, thank you. Linda, thank you. The entire LA Conservancy and everyone viewing, thank you so much. Council District 13 is home to some of the city's most important historic resources, whether significant because of the architecture, people, or events that took place. Each of the buildings tell the city's rich and culturally diverse past. I became a proponent of historic preservation when I witnessed the destruction of dozens of blocks of historic downtown Oklahoma City while growing up there. Beautiful Art Deco, Sullivan-esque, and Beaux Arts buildings, along with silent era movie palaces, made way for bland, contemporary, and brutalist structures that diminish the cultural and economic value of the city. I know firsthand what that can do. Since coming to Los Angeles in the 13th District 40 years ago, I've supported historic preservation. Prior to becoming council member, I worked on historic cultural monuments, including the Landacre House in Elysian Heights, the Black Cat Bar and Mattachine Steps in Silver Lake, among others. And since taking office, there have been another 34 such designations in the 13th district, and I believe that might be unmatched in any other district. This will continue. More often than not, historic preservation has been a top priority of mine, and that can be balanced with my priority of affordable housing production while always seeking creative solutions that save our historic structures. Making HCM designation part of an overall entitlement process has been a part of what we've always done. To date, under my watch, there have been over 4,300 units of covenanted affordable housing where we've preserved structures and permanent supportive housing in the 13th district. The city writ large has so much further to go, but thus far, we've done much more than our fair share of balancing the needs of affordable housing and leading the rest of the city in historic preservations. Thank you again. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Hugo?
Yeah, thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Hugo Soto-Martinez. I'm a lifelong Angelino, born and raised to my parents who migrated to this country from Mexico. They were street vendors as I was growing up. At the age of 14, my dad sustained a back injury that left him disabled for life. And so I started working at a non-union hotel since the age of 16. I worked that job through high school and through college. Very happy to graduate from UC Irvine with a criminology and political science degree. And since in my last year as a senior in college, Unite HRE, the Hotel Workers Union, started organizing my workplace. I joined the fight. We won the union. We won great wages, health insurance, pension, respect on the job. And since then, I've made it my entire adult life job. I've been there for 16 years. And I've done a lot of amazing things in the city. Never thought I would run for office, but here we are. What motivated me to run was seeing my city being, the city where I grew up my entire life, being destroyed. I've worked in this district for the last 16 years. And when I think about preservation, I think about the community and I think about the people that live here and the small businesses. And what I've seen is this district has lost 12,000 people since the last census data. That's been mostly through gentrification. It's been through Ellis evictions. This district has gone through over 1,900 Ellis evictions since the incumbent took office. We've seen luxury development. We've seen historical buildings like the Taix and Amoeba being destroyed for development. And so when I see those things, I see a community being pushed away farther and farther from the city. And so I joined this fight to try to turn things around. I recognize that it's not going to just be me doing it, but a community of advocates. And that's what I choose to do. That's what I plan to do when we win.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to you both and welcome. So we're going to start the process now of going through the long form questions. Again, we have 6 questions. The first 3 questions, Mitch, you'll start with, and then we'll change the order. And Hugo, you'll start with the other 3. So let me start, and I apologize, these are long questions, but there'll be a punchline. So just bear with us a little bit. So the first question is focused on growth community planning. As Los Angeles continues to grow and struggle to meet various priorities, such as affordable housing and homelessness and thoughtful planning design, we are also sometimes needlessly experiencing losses of historic places that people and communities care about. One tool for this is a community plan, and updating them is a stated priority for the city. Yet it is a slow process and doesn't always balance all interest. For instance, in Hollywood, unlike any other community plan in the city, the pending plan doesn't include any recognition of historic properties eligible at the local level. How will you address this key shortcoming in the Hollywood community plan before it is officially adopted? And what will you do to help reconcile perceived conflicts around historic preservation and proposed new development in Council District 13? So Mitch first.
Thanks, Adrian. Well, what all community plans do recognize is contributing structures that are eligible for historic preservation many times over. We're very aware of this dynamic. And so many times over the past 2 terms, as I mentioned, 34 structures that we've preserved have been incorporated into some of the redevelopment projects, many of them, in fact, that are now part of the historic register locally. Some of those examples are the Palladium, Coretta Kent, Earl Carroll Theater. So many times we incorporate, as we grow, these historic structures. And I'm not a believer that we have to sacrifice our history as we evolve into the future. In fact, cities gain value the more they can lean in on historic preservation. It adds value, it adds a cultural value. It also is a great incentive for economic development and growth. And it just improves the quality of life. People need to feel good about where they live and where they work. We are watching the drafting of the Hollywood Community Plan very, very closely. And before it even comes to committee, we are going to take a look at what's there, what the planning department is providing to us. And we have lots of ideas on how we can strengthen the requirements for historic preservation. You better believe that is part of what we do. We want to make sure that places like the Warner Pacific Theater, which I've refused to let be partially torn down since I've been in office, one of the last movie palaces built, those need to be recognized and incorporated into the identity of the community plan update in Hollywood. In fact, that's what I believe across the district for all community plan updates.
Great, thank you. Hugo, same question.
Yeah, thank you. So I worked on the Hollywood Community Plan as part of a coalition to try to get some decent policy embedded in that community plan. And so, as many people in this room probably felt incredibly frustrated by that process. A lot of the community input that was given, especially on my end, the electrification of buildings and building tree canopies. Sorry, I heard some noise. Many folks, I'm sure, in this room are frustrated with that process because oftentimes, there's a lot of weight and deference given to the council members, and certainly on. Give me a second.
Sorry about that. Can we hold the clock for a second, and can we mute on the other? I think we're okay now. Sorry about that, Hugo.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. After 2 years, we're still trying to figure this out. As I was saying, I'm sure many people in this room felt incredibly frustrated by the process. Certainly, as a coalition, we asked for a lot of things. We're trying to do the right thing. Many of these issues, the council member remained silent on. I think that was a moment to really take a strong position and see that process go through CPC, and CPC just completely undo everything that even the planning department was trying to work on. And so I've never been in a situation where uniformly everybody was opposed to the community plan. So one of the things that I am hoping is that community plan is not passed. I hope that the current council member can recognize that we're in the middle of an election, and that seat might look very different come November 8th, and that the voters through their voting of this election are saying something about what the community should look like, and that decision should remain after the election. I think that is a correct thing to do, and so I will immediately try to reopen every single piece of that community plan, because I do think, as it currently stands, it's not ideal, and everyone can agree with that. And how you balance that, I think it's about working with the community. What I've learned in the last 16 years in the union is you have to bring people into the process. If folks feel like they are not part of the process, then I would recognize that as a failure on my part. And so the way we work through those conflicts is by bringing people together.
All right, thank you. Okay, our next question is focused on the Mills Act program. The city's Mills Act program is the primary economic incentive for preservation in Los Angeles, offering owners of historic buildings a reduction in their annual property tax liability. For the past 2 years, LA's program has been on pause in accepting new Mills Act applicants while the city commissioned an independent assessment of the program. The assessment's recommendations include strategies to improve program equity, such as prioritizing Mills Act contracts for multifamily housing or in historically disinvested neighborhoods. The most controversial suggestion is to cancel some existing older Mills Act contracts and cap the total number of properties in the program. What are your thoughts on the proposed amendments to the Mills Act program? And how can we promote greater diversity within the program and continue to invest in historic resources that have survived because of their Mills Act benefits? Mitch?
The capping is very arbitrary and random, so that's problematic. Let me just say, though, that the worst thing an elected official can do is usurp a community process where there have been hundreds of meetings, not just a few, but hundreds of public meetings as it relates to the Hollywood Community Plan update. So the worst thing an elected official could do is lean in and direct the public process. Everyone needs to have input before an elected official intervenes. There's a process that's set up for that, and that's what we're following. Regarding Mills Act, preserving the Mills Act and expanding funding so that participants can continue to get incentives to maintain their historic building, what we really have to do is go after the bad actors. So I am in strong support of enforcement of Mills Act contracts to ensure that tax dollars are being used towards historic preservation. As evidenced, I'm sure LA Conservancy saw my motion to look into the Richard Neutra's Jardinette Apartments, for example, in the Little Church of Hollywood. There are bad actors that receive funding for Mills Act restoration, and they don't use that funding to restore the historic structure. And that's a problem because that makes the entire program look bad. It diminishes. I initiated the nomination of threatened buildings, such as the McKee Construction Branch Office building in Atwater Village. A lot of these preserved through Mills Act. And so I think that's the way we approach it. I encourage it. I connect as many people as I can who own contributing structures to Mills Act resources on how to apply, where to apply, how you do it. Mills Act has worked beautifully in cities across the United States. It's worked really well here. We certainly don't want to, sacrifice the good to try to reach the perfect and shoot ourselves in the foot in the process.
Thank you. Same question, Hugo.
Yeah, I think that the Mills Act is good because it gives money to folks to do historical preservation. And a couple of things that I have issues with this is that oftentimes these are used incorrectly, I think, but it also speaks larger to the budget policies and priorities of the city and how we fund that. I think what we see is that folks that are in the community trying to do the good work, grassroots activists, many folks I think in this room, just simply don't have the city structures or what do you call this, outreach that happens in the community. And so regardless of what you're trying to interact with the city, I think there's a lot of bureaucracy, whether you're a small business owner or even a developer. Everyone sort of says that the city, it does not give the resources to the people in the community doing the work. And so one of the things that I'm the most passionate about and feel the most strong is the work that I've done in the union is about educating, bringing people into the process and showing them how the city can actually work for them. And so I think a lot of the groups doing the work, we need to make sure that we have a lot of education and just involve people in the community. I think that's going to be my strongest point.
Great, thank you. The next question is focused on legacy businesses and Tex in Echo Park. Plans to redevelop the site of the Tex French restaurant in Echo Park highlight several questions about how best to protect legacy businesses, preserve historic buildings, and respect the intent of the city's cultural heritage ordinance. The Cultural Heritage Commission recommended to City Council to designate Tex as an historic cultural monument, or HCM, including the building and entire parcel. Yet based on a recommendation from Council District 13, the full City Council resulted in action that resulted in a designation that reduced the scope to only 2 exterior signs and an interior bar top, paving the way for demolition and redevelopment. We believe this action undermines the purpose of HCM designation and sets a harmful precedent as a way to circumvent preservation protections in the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. Do you agree with our position on this issue? And will you support other efforts that may seek to limit HCM designation to a quote, in name only, in quote, scope and architectural salvage? Mitch first.
I think that we agree, the LA Conservancy and my office agrees 99.9% of the time on historic preservation. But the Conservancy's win-win solution was not a win-win situation. It changed the type of construction of the housing and made it economically infeasible. We would have lost the housing, including 24 units of covenanted low-income housing. and we would have lost the legacy business. Preserving this the way the Conservancy wanted to would have resulted in a fenced up building deteriorating with no use whatsoever, and certainly not 24 units of covenanted affordable housing. Even though the commission voted a certain way, some of the choice remarks, Commissioner Canner described the architecture quality as being negligible. Commissioner Richard Barron described it as Disneyland. It's not architecture as to what we want to consider architecture. That brick is glued into the wall, and you know what I mean? That was his quote. And then Commissioner Malofsky, I'm finding it hard to sort of deal with 25-year-old interior decoration changes and some applique stucco and clinker brick. We worked with the owners of Tex. This was the only way for that legacy business to come back with partial preservation on the inside. We're preserving a business and we're building 24 units of covenanted affordable housing, which represents 14%. We have a housing crisis on our hands. We have to balance the needs. This is one where I disagree with the LA Conservancy.
Great, thank you. And same question, Hugo, and the clock seems to be on and off, so let's make sure it goes on first before you start, because I just want to make sure we're okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the council member because this isn't just one example of a legacy building being destroyed, being moved, or taken away. This has been the last 20 years. Very clearly, this neighborhood has changed. Everyone could just look around CD13 and see that it is not the same neighborhood. It is not simply about the buildings being removed, like Amoeba and the church on Lucille and Griffith Park, for developers, right? But it is the kind of housing we're building. So all those effects are changing the character in the neighborhood and how this neighborhood looks like. There's a reason I moved from South Central to East Hollywood, is because when I discovered this area, I love the beauty of it, the small businesses. And so I would, very similar to the Hollywood Community Plan, every development that is happening in the district, as soon as we get into office, we're going to do an audit. We're going to see how much of that is happening, right? And Dykes is one of them. We're going to re-look at that if it's possible. It doesn't get finalized, because I don't think that the decisions are made with the correct perspective. We are not taking any money from developers, zero. Because when we make those decisions, we don't want to take conflicted decisions, right? And so I disagree with it from the outside. I want to look into the Dykes more, but I agree that is terrible precedent. Very similar happened to the spaghetti factory in Hollywood. It was just a facade. And so we have to be mindful that when we're making these decisions, that the precedent we're setting is going to affect the way this is looked at in the future forever. And so, and that's something that I as a union organizer that negotiates contracts, I understand the challenge in that, and so I will take a strong position.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to switch order, so this will be your back-to-back, Hugo, for the next 3 questions, and then Mitch to follow. This question is focused on housing. Addressing the housing crisis is more complicated than simply producing more housing units. It is also a matter of preserving, reinvesting in, and utilizing existing affordable units. The Conservancy's 2020 report, Preservation Positive, gathered data demonstrating that LA's older and historic housing also contains the largest concentration of existing affordable, rent-stabilized, or RSO, as well as naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. Meanwhile, the vacancy report produced by the Strategic Alliance for a Just Economy reveals how speculative development sometimes leads to new market rate and luxury units that are more likely to be vacant than older market rate housing stock. Further, the city's new housing element puts existing historic RSO units in CD13 and citywide at risk through calls to upzone. What incentives and/or deterrence would you advocate for to preserve existing affordable housing stock and create opportunities for more affordable housing in Council District 13? So, Hugo, and let's again make sure the clock is up first.
Yeah, thank you so much. You're touching on quite possibly the most urgent issue of the city, because it's very much tied to the homeless crisis. As I mentioned, in CD 13 since 2013, we have lost 1,916 RSO units because of the Ellis Act. Something that we could be doing in the city. I know it's a state law, but there is a proposal that has been forward to try to limit that. That has not happened. This district has lost 12,000 residents. That's been mostly to not just Ellis, but also Cash for Keys. And so it's true. And yet we see so much building happen in the district. So it's not just about building our way out, but what I would advocate for is how are we protecting the tenants of this district, making sure they have right to counsel, that we have a massive outreach effort from the council office to educate folks on how they can defend themselves from unscrupulous landlords, but also preserving old covenants, make sure we're extending those covenants, preserving all the buildings that were there. And of course, you mentioned a lot of vacant units in the district. I'm in favor of a vacancy tax. I think it's important to make sure we don't have developers, getting away with what they do right now. And so all those things, it's what's causing the lack of preserving these units. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that's why we're not taking any money from the developers, because when we go into city council, we want to make sure that they understand that this is a council office that is not going to be beholden to them, that we're going to hold them accountable and get more than the meager 9% that we get. It's just not enough. Even the more conservative housing groups say that we can ask for 20 or 30% affordable housing on these developments. And so we're going to take a very strong approach when we take the seat come November.
Thank you. Mitch?
Let's start with what he just said. 29% of all housing under construction or approved in the 13th district, 29% is covenanted affordable. Not 8 or 9, 29%. In Hollywood, it's much higher, and it has been for a long time. That's because we're producing more than any other council district, and none of that's happened on its own. It's happened because of leadership and holding developers accountable and working with historic preservationists to do adaptive reuse and do HCMs in entitlement processes as well. It's widely believed, and I think this is true, that the 12% reduction in population is because undocumented immigrants were scared to be counted during the Trump era when the census was counted, and that's a tragedy. But you know what? I'm a public servant serving people who are documented or undocumented. That does not matter to me at all. And we've always been focused on protecting the RSO that exists, fighting against tenants in common, and railing against the Ellis Act. My office has worked very diligently to do everything we can at the local level, and we are at our limit to what's possible in protecting tenants who have been Ellised. It is a state law. I've called for reform of that state law, and the Sacramento, it's something worth lobbying about. They just refuse to modify Ellis, and it's causing problems. However, RSO isn't always affordable. When someone moves out, it becomes a market rate apartment. But we need to preserve all we can. We need to fight against tenants in common, Ellis, and simply produce covenant affordable, like the Louis Mayer building at Hollywood and Western. You know, that's 76 units and an adaptive reuse building of affordable housing for seniors. That's what my office does.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, next question is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Only 10% of Los Angeles' historic cultural monuments, or HCMs, are designated in connection to women, LGBTQ+, and Black, Indigenous, people of color, or BIPOC communities. Hollywood's Sister Mary Carita Studio, which was designated as an HCM in 2021, faced opposition initially because, like many sites connected to historically marginalized communities, it wasn't architecturally significant and had been physically altered from its original appearance. What meaningful steps will you take to remove barriers within city planning efforts and the HCM program to increase community participation, ensure we are telling the fuller story of all of Los Angeles? So, Hugo?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and the reason the Carita can't thing happen is because there was a massive national outpouring to preserve that. And so it speaks to a lot of the things that I'm describing. Is in order to have change at City Hall, you need to have grassroots energy and power when we do these things. And so that's something that I will continue to advocate for. And so the first thing we got to do is start with our own house. I've committed that when we win November 8th, that the majority of folks on our staff will be women. The majority will be women of color. And I think we need to be, and that's just in our office. So we'll start with us. And second, we recognize that systemic racism and how these issues of race, gender, or class are viewed in any institution have to be transparent. And so one of the things we've advocated for is to do a complete audit of every city department and see what the composition of those departments will be. And I think we're all gonna see, right, that there lacks equity even in the departments. A good example of this is the firefighters, right? The hiring of women is very low. But when we have, that's the first step, is you first said we have to recognize where the decisions are being made in the city. And then the second thing is those policies need to be written by the people who will be affected by, who will be benefited from the most. This is something that we have done in the hotel industry. In the union, we did an audit of who has the jobs, who has the best schedules. And what we found was that all the groups, the marginalized groups, did not have access to those good jobs. And then through our contracts that we had with the employer, we made it in the contract that they had to do hiring and make sure that there was more equity in the entirety of its department. And so that is the same thing we have to do here in City Council, but we're going to start with our office first.
Great, thank you. Mitch?
I'm going to answer your question. The Coretta-Kent historic preservation is something I believed in from the first moment I heard about it, but I knew it was going to be tough by purists in the industry because it had been modified. And so we worked with the preservation team. We worked with the developer of the marketplace who did not want us to do this at all. And I was assertive in that this is going to happen. She was an incredible artist. And her legacy lives on, and the community supported it widely. We were very aware of that. We didn't need to be pushed, prodded, or cajoled into this. It's something that I led with from the very beginning, and very proud of that. I'm also leading with the recognition of historic Indigenous and Native American sites across the city and across the county. One of my ordinances calls for that. I am the only LGBTQ representative left in city leadership, and it matters to me. That's why I dedicated the Mattachine Steps, and that's why I led in the, not dedication, but HCM, I led in the HCM of the designation of the Black Cat Bar because of what happened historically there. It's also why I spearheaded the demolition notification ordinance when I was a new council member, so that a 30-day notice is given after, on a weekend, on a Sunday evening, there was an overnight demolition of the former Different Light bookstore in Silver Lake. Happened before I got into office, but I was so outraged. That was one of the first ordinances that I led on, and that was the first lesbian bookstore in all of Los Angeles. So I will continue to fight to not lose our BIPOC and minority historic landmarks, and am fighting to ensure that there's a greater value in the historic preservation community in this space.
Thank you. Okay, our last of our long form questions is focused on leadership. Currently, it can be difficult for Los Angeles residents and community stakeholders to get involved in the planning processes that shape their neighborhood. Projects take years to be planned, approved, and implemented, but opportunities for public comment are often limited to 60 seconds at a public hearing. What ideas do you have for ensuring resident and stakeholder engagement from the very beginning of projects and broader planning policies? Also, what's your track record for making sure underrepresented groups have a seat at the table when it comes to decisions that directly impact them and their neighborhood? So, Hugo?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that this process is very prohibitive for working people. It's prohibitive for, unless their first language is English. And so we have done a lot of out. And so going back to the Hollywood Community Plan, where we just talked, as part of our coalition, we're literally going door to door talking to people about the Hollywood Community Plan. We must have canvassed over 2,000 people. We have over 2,000 conversations, and we must have knocked on tens of thousands of doors. And what we learned was the obvious is that people didn't know that they were going to be affected by this community plan, right? We had them call in, we had them write letters, we invited them to the planning department meetings. We would literally say, you're on this street, it is going to get upzoned with no ties to affordable housing. And what do you think your neighborhood's going to look if that happens? People intuitively know because they look around and they see a community that's changing. And so as a council member, where I'm going to really be the strongest and most robust is have that interaction with the community. It is the interaction I have learned in the union. You can't just allow people to come to you. You have to be proactive and go to them, bring them into the process, understand, be flexible with the timing, right? We can't just have meetings in the daytime. Some people work at night. Make it so that everyone and anyone can come in and partake as part of the process. I've thought about this because of the frustrations that I have felt as a renter, as an activist in the city, trying to move the needle at city government. And what I've learned is when you do those things, there's nothing to be afraid of. The community will work through the issues, but you make it accessible, you make it transparent, you make people feel like their city government actually cares about them and is involving them in the process. And so that is a commitment that I've been making throughout the campaign trail.
Great, thank you. Mitch?
I'm one of the founders of the Glassell Park Neighborhood Council. We were the third certified in the city of Los Angeles, and that was back in January of 2002. I cut my teeth on volunteerism in my community in Glassell Park, where I've lived for 30 years with my partner. And I always go to the communities, and I don't wait for people to come to me. I never have. I'm out in the community all the time, evening meetings, Zoom meetings now. More town halls are starting to happen, in-person meetings in the evenings. That and the work of my team, we fan out across the district on a regular basis. And again, I will reiterate that in Hollywood, it's well over a third of all housing under construction or approved funded is well over a third is covenant affordable housing. At times, it's even higher than that. That's leadership. We've done the focus groups. We've done the outreach. We continue to do the outreach. My team does outreach on a daily basis. And so that is just part of what is a given. That is a forever. People come and go. People are busy. You have to meet people where they are. And that's what my team has always done. And to this date, on the Hollywood Walk of Fame Master Plan, which is something that my office is leading in, we've had 65 roundtables, and it is a community focus. Residents telling the planners, telling our office what they want to see in this community plan, this Hollywood Walk of Fame Master Plan. And it is for the community, it is by the community. And we're so excited because the construction, the first implementation begins next summer, less than a year from right now. So we work with the community, in the community, to create improvements like this. It is a national registered landmark. We're very protective of it, but it can be so much better. It can be better and community serving. That's our focus.
Thank you. Okay, we made it through the long form questions. We're going to switch now to what we're calling our rapid fire. It's not that rapid, but shorter questions, shorter amount of time. I think 45 seconds will be the response. So this one will move quicker in terms of this. And we're going to flip the order back to Mitch. We'll do the first two questions to start with, and then the second two questions, Hugo, and then we'll do another little coin toss for the last question. And then we'll do closing remarks. So let's start this. Again, Mitch, you'll answer first. It's focused on top priorities. What about the current city planning process would you hope to change and improve to be more effective for Council District 13 community efforts?
We have to eliminate the slow bureaucracy in the planning department. We have to have a mayor that will help the city council do that, because all general managers report to the mayor or the mayor's office. Almost on a daily basis, I or my planning director will call over to the planning department and say, we're waiting for this permit because we need to get a certificate of occupancy for this just finished affordable housing project. It shouldn't have to take a council office to do that. So we need to hire more because there is definitely a shortage of employees by about a third. They need to really ramp it up. And those are job opportunities for Angelenos. So we need to increase that. And I'd say that's one of the top priorities.
Thank you. Hugo?
Yeah, we need to have more community input baked into a lot of the power that the city council has. Right now, what we have is very backwards process where the council member has way too much power in the decision making. That's why the developers run this town, is because so much discretion is given to the council, and so I think the discretion should be community driven through the community plans, truly through the community and through the community plans. That should give it more weight. I think when you give too much power to the council member, that opens up for the corruption and the backroom dealing, the negotiating that is also making housing be built much slower.
Great, thank you. The next question is focused on Hollywood. The Hollywood Boulevard National Register Historic District holds great significance to the city, yet is extremely fragile as it is seeing new development pressures, incompatible new construction in some cases, and vacant buildings that, if left unchecked, may ultimately threaten its historic district status. How will you help steer and press for appropriate development, design review tools and protections, and rehabilitation efforts that respect and enhance the Hollywood Boulevard? Mitch?
By working with our partners like we currently do. Look, we're coming out of a pandemic where a lot of businesses closed, and the whole shift in retail started long before the pandemic began. We're going to have to really focus in on adaptive reuse. I talk about that a whole lot. Some storefronts will need to be adaptively reused. And like I said at the outset of this, we don't have to sacrifice what's special about our built environment as we evolve into the future. We have protected so many of the facades along Hollywood Boulevard. We'll continue to do that. I think the Warner Pacific Theater is a great anchor for that, right in the middle of the boulevard. And meantime, we're doing things like lighting the trees at night to make it safer, more visible, and more walkable.
Thank you. Hugo?
Yeah, I've had the honor to talk to a lot of the business owners in our last debate. Actually, there was a sponsored by Hollywood Forward. And so I want to speak for the concerns that they brought to me. And that was every single concern. And that's about the lack of safety that they're feeling because of the unhoused population that's there. It is hurting businesses, it's hurting tourism. I think the way we're trying to deal with that right now is very short-sighted. We funded a no-bid contract to fund Circle, but it's been very ineffective. And so we have to work with all the partners there to make sure that district feels safe, that we're encouraging businesses and it's being revitalized. I think if we do that first, we can then discuss the more larger issue.
Great, thank you. Now we'll reverse order. So Hugo, you'll be first, and then followed by Mitch. The next question is focused on demolition deterrence. Currently, the city's enforcement and fines for demolishing or irreparably harming an historic building is severely lacking and inadequate in addressing this issue in comparison to most cities. Council District 13 has introduced a motion to address this problem. As council member, what tangible deterrence and policies will you propose, and how soon, to make it more difficult to demolish, illegally alter, or intentionally neglect historic buildings in Council District 13 and throughout Los Angeles?
Well, I think folks talked about a little bit earlier here is putting stronger protections in the community plan. And so I hope to come back to that and really look at it in a real way so people can feel comfortable with that. But the other one is the Ellis demolitions that I also mentioned earlier. Although we can't stop Ellis from happening, what we could do is curtail it or limit it. And so there's been discussions within the city council to put a quota or a cap per community plan. And so that's an ordinance that I think needs to be pushed through and passed until we can have state reform. It doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. If we can get that passed, then we'll at least try to slow down the cause of it, because right now it's much accelerated. And since 2016 and 2019, those Ellis evictions have accelerated even more. So we need to stop them as soon as possible.
Mitch?
Well, Adrian, and with the question, you cited my leadership on this issue, and we're known for that. And we absolutely have to get these laws in place and keep our minds open to how we can further protect historic and contributing structures. Let's not forget, it's the contributing structures that we need to really look at this point, because those are the future teardowns if they're purchased by a developer with a plan that cannot be supported by the community or the council office. So we'll just continue that and really ramp up our ability to put some form of local control over, again, tenants in common, which we didn't really talk about, and compel the state to reform Ellis. And again, that's a state law. We've done everything within the envelope, but we need to do more where we can.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off.
It's all right.
Next question. It's focused on environment, adaptive reuse. New construction is one of the highest producers of carbon emissions. A recent Los Angeles Times article amplified an argument frequently made by preservationists that converting an existing building to a new use is more environmentally sustainable than building a new one. The article highlighted a recent RAND study that identified 2,300 underutilized office and hotel properties in Los Angeles County that could be converted to housing. As council member, will you incorporate preservation and adaptive reuse into your platform for environmental sustainability?
Waiting for the clock to come on.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was actually one of our first policy platforms that we put out over a year ago. And now mostly we're talking about permanent supportive housing because we taxed ourselves, or we created a bond of Measure Triple H to build new housing, but we could have done adaptive reuse for our unhoused population. What we've learned is that it is faster to do, more environmentally friendly. It's, you know, there's preservation there, and it builds the units online faster. And so we've talked about the St. Vincent Hospital for over a year now. There's a lot of hotels that closed during the pandemic. I know this because I work for the Hotel Workers Union, and there's a lot of those that have been identified. So let's use those for housing first, as opposed to trying to build our way out of it.
Okay, great, thank you. Mitch?
Thank you. This gives me a chance to talk a little more about the Mayor Building. It's 79 units of covenanted affordable housing in a historically preserved structure that requires only tenant improvements on the inside. This is the textbook example of where we want to lead with adaptive reuse. There are many, I mentioned Earl Carroll Theater, I mentioned the Palladium, many other projects, including Crossroads of the World, that'll have a lot of adaptive reuse as well. And let's also not forget the Hollyhock House in Residence A, which I've fully restored. The Hollyhock House, Residence A is on the way. It's the only city UNESCO World Heritage Site because of the work and collaboration of the folks who care about this with my office. So I'm big on adaptive reuse.
Thank you. Okay, we made it through most of the questions. We have one last question. We'll do a coin toss to determine who goes first. So whoever wants to call, I don't know who called it. Okay, do you want to call it first time?
Heads.
It is heads, so you'll go first. It's a really difficult question. What is your favorite historic place in Los Angeles? I think Mitch, you're first.
Oh, this me?
Yeah.
I have two, the Hollywood Bowl and the Watts Towers.
Okay. Both good places. Hugo? Same question.
Oh, wow. You know, I live next to Barnsdall, so I'm going to say the Hollyhock House.
Great. Appreciate that. Okay. We would like to now offer an opportunity for closing remarks by each candidate. I think, if I recall, Mitch, you went first. Is that correct? An opening. So, Hugo, if you want to start with closing remarks, you'll have 2 minutes, and then followed by Mitch.
Thank you all for having me. It's a good discussion, good questions. I'm walking away. I'm like, oh, I gotta really dig deep on all of these issues because y'all are the experts. But I'm gonna depend a lot on your expertise and your opinions. As I mentioned many times, that's how I wanna run the office is bringing people into the office. But, you know, I would say that I think at this election, folks are going to have a very clear contrast and a very clear decision on who they're going to vote for. I've been a union organizer. I've worked with the community. I believe in transparency and community and co-governance. We're not taking any money from the developers, from the fossil fuels, because we are not running conflicted. And as a result of the values and how we're projecting our campaign, we came in first place. We came up in first place by 9 points. And I think we're in a very strong position to win. You know, the current incumbent, over half of his money comes from the developers. Most of the folks don't even live in the city of Los Angeles. I think we've all seen the city, or the direction that it's in right now. I have yet, in my entire campaign trail, I have yet to meet somebody that says the city is working for them, that they're thrilled and they're excited. Everyone is citing the lack of affordable housing, the skyrocketing rents, the unhoused situation that is just untenable, the lack of protected bike lanes or pedestrian infrastructure that we built in the city. And so I think everyone here can agree that we are not in the right direction as a city. And so as someone who has worked in the community to try to affect change from the outside, so the city hall elected officials can do the right thing, I understand that frustration. I understand that anger. And so my reason for running for this is to bring that energy, bring the energy of folks that are in this room doing the good work, and bring that into City Hall to really change the dynamic of how things work there. And hopefully I've earned your vote today.
Thank you. Mitch?
Thank you so much. Thank you, LA Conservancy, for putting this together and sticking with us for the last hour. I'll address some of my opponent's pieces of disinformation, and then I want to close with something inspirational. It's amazing to me that he would be against Urban Alchemy, which are my practitioners who have helped reduce homelessness in Hollywood by 57%. Not because we move people from one block to another, but because we house more people than ever before. And talk about safety and homelessness. My opponent does not believe in regulating the public right-of-way anywhere, including the historic Walk of Fame. Well, we can regulate the rights-of-way now because we're housing more people than ever before. And those two go hand in hand. Amoeba Records, it's a building constructed in the 90s. It's not historic. It's making way for a big project that includes 5% of affordable with a significant contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. My opponent doesn't really know what else to say except through accusations and claims because he doesn't know the district. He's been absent, just moved here to run for the seat. Regardless, what people are going to vote for are what it means for them in the future. My record on historic preservation is clear. Moving forward, it's all about jobs, the economy, and smart growth and historic preservation as we recover from COVID, which we are, and a more livable, environmentally friendly city, cleaning the air, making sure that we electrify, which is something that I'm leading on the Los Angeles City Council. We have to continue this adaptive reuse in that space as well, because we're going to need to electrify all of these buildings. So I'm working on these clean power purchase agreements. So I'm a historic preservationist. I'm a public servant, not an ideologue, and people want services and they want the respect and they want someone who believes in community, and that's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you to you both. I really appreciate you taking part in this and to being so open with this. We ask hard questions because this work around preservation and planning and development is complicated. It's anything but easy to do this in Los Angeles. So again, thank you. We really appreciate you taking part in this forum. We learned a lot in the last hour. And also to thank everybody that tuned in. We will be sharing this recorded program far and wide to all who registered and through our YouTube channel and between now and the election. This concludes our, at least as we are right now, this concludes our Preservation Perspective series, which featured runoff council district races for Council District 11, Council District 5, Council District 15, and Council District 13. All those past events are available on our YouTube, and between now and the election, we'll be sharing these again with our members and supporters. But again, thank you so much, Hugo. Thank you, Mitch, for taking part in this, and thank you all for being here today, and have a great day.
Likewise. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.